They had the, like these.
No, my husband's like, we're not getting the package for the whole time. He goes,
Oh,
"We're gonna
yeah.
do the pay for the day." And
So
I'm like,
my
all
cousin
right.
looked up bushes for me, and then I came out.
The kids, he's like, the kids will be fine.
Well, it's so funny because we're going. Yeah, my back's a little sore. So, yeah, it was like Stonehenge. I had to dig up the stone and down the back. He's like, "Look, some more years
I know, I was like, my parents used to go there.
So
Yeah, I made it really turned
But the
out.
kids, because they were.
Someone, my neighbors are walking by.
And so
I don't know
they
why we
canceled,
were
they were like explaining like, so we're going to maintenance status.
One guy said,
We're just there hoping to see how it's all gonna turn out. Helping bring down landscaping. And I'm like, so we're landing and we're,
I mean, thank God for my son.
Powder side away.
It's like the roller color.
Well, I find
It's commercial roller.
Just to get away with it.
She only got it there and I'm
We have
like,
my,
what am I gonna do with it?
mom's baby is
Well, yeah, sure, yeah. I went over
And
and
so
my son did
they
that.
carnegie
And my
plans
son
and
has
which is
That's a good resource. Hello, everybody. We'll call the meeting of the September CIA meeting to order. I'll call the roll here. Calvin Jones, Chris Christofsky, Laura Miller.
Here.
Scott Berman.
Here.
Tony McGaldy, Peggy Von Payne,
Here.
Rachel Singa,
Here.
and Brian Torek.
Here.
And Supervisor Fletcher is here. We have a quorum. We have the agenda before us. Any additions or deletions? If not, a motion to approve.
Motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
Is there support? Support. There is support. All those in favor of approving the agenda as submitted, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion carries. Public comment. I don't see anybody in the audience other than staff, so we'll continue on here. We have the minutes of our July 11th, 2022 meetings. What's the pleasure of the CIA on approving those items today?
I make a motion to approve the minutes as submitted for July 11th.
Is there support?
Support.
There is support. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion carries. We have no old business and new business. First one is approval of the 2023 budget. And you'll see in your packet, there was a draft budget that's being recommended. Courtney, did you want to walk us through our very small limited budget here?
Yep, so this will be the first CIA budget, and so we're currently collecting capture from the summer tax, and then we'll collect a little bit more from the winter tax, and you can see the final total there based on the values. Or the incremental value that you guys are able to capture. Right now, we're just capturing from Lansing and Eaton County, Lansing Community College and Eaton County, and then the township and the library will come next in the winter. So basically just kind of put something out there, show the revenue, the expenses. I just put in the draft, we're reimbursing the township a first payment, reimbursing the startup cost. I had these 2% of capture that was in the plan for township administrative cost, and then just a placeholder cost for any consultant services. So basically January 1, the CIA would start paying their own bills. Right now, the township has paid for Suzanne's time, and we will continue through the end of December. So there will be another reimbursement request in the 24 budget. It will be a little bit more because that's not all the cost. That 93,000 or whatever is just through the end of August. So yeah, it can be, so basically the process is that the board adopts the budget and then it's included in the big budget adoption that the township board will do.
Do folks have any questions of Courtney?
I do. The distribution of the other government units is consistent with the numbers we drove before, and they're percentage of the spread, right? That's what that number reflects.
Yeah, so it's the amount and then, but with the 25% that they keep.
That they keep.
Mhm,
Yep, okay.
Yeah, yeah, then it all came back and then we, made sure all the correct parcels were in there and yeah, so that's the amount minus that 25%.
Other questions? Seeing none, are folks then okay with the recommendation as presented?
Do you want a motion?
I do, except that's making me less nervous. Our presenters aren't here. So
I was just
we got nothing
texting.
else to do. They don't
Right.
know.
I
Are you
was
guys
just
sure you don't have like
Drag this
15
out.
minutes of questions? Yeah, we can have a motion.
Okay. Motion to approve the 2023 budget as proposed. Resubmitted.
Is there support? Support. Then there is support. All those in favor of approving the budget as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion carries. So next, so the discussion that we have planned for this meeting is the discussion that we recommended in terms of bringing in some of the commercial real estate folks, and maybe this is over there. Our commercial real estate folks to talk about just what they're seeing as far as on the corridor. We also invited the Lansing Mall to come and be part of a discussion, but they didn't confirm to come, so we don't have them here today. They certainly have been making some sales of property and everything at the mall that is interesting to see that some stuff is going on. And also the mall actually was on the news, I believe it was last week now, there was a news story where they were talking about new good things will be coming to the mall, yet they didn't really talk about any new good things that was coming to the mall, but they said that there would be good new things coming to the mall. So I guess that was a hopeful story. So we'll see what actually comes of that, if anything, but I know they've been selling some of their property. I know they sold the Best Buy building recently. They sold the Yonkers building recently. They have theater for sale, so we'll see what they continue to do in terms of selling some of those lots and buildings and property at the mall. So that could either mean good things are coming or they're just.
So Best Buy, did they just sell the land lease? Is that basically what they sold?
So they sold the building. I don't know if Best Buy has a longer term lease or if Best Buy is going to be leaving. I guess we don't know that for certain. So we don't know what the status or what the owner is going to do with the building now that they will own it. They have plans other than Best Buy or not.
So they're selling just like bits and pieces of them all?
So far, yes. The Yonkers was sold for Zap Zone, so that's one that we did know. Zap Zone is going to move into the Yonkers building, so I think that's a good thing that it greatly expands the space they have available for Zap Zone. So that's already a fairly popular attraction that will become more popular, I think, with more space and ability to host bigger events and stuff. So that's a good positive move on their part. The Best Buy, we just have to wait and see. We don't know what's going to happen there. As far as the theater being for sale, I don't know what that means long term for the theater. I know Regal is struggling nationwide, not just here, but nationwide they're struggling. But then I think most theaters are struggling because the theater industry never really came back after COVID. People are not flocking to see movies, and there's been some good movies this summer, I think, that have pulled in people, but theaters are still saying they're nowhere near, what they were seeing before COVID. So I don't know what the long-term future for theaters will be, but definitely that building's now for sale. So we'll see what comes of that, if anything.
Yeah, that would be hard to take a movie theater and make it something else.
Absolutely, especially that's
That's how
it
it's-
is a good sized theater, so I'm not sure what else would go there, and I'm not sure if another theater would want to go there. I don't know if any theater is expanding right now with the industry what it is, and plus too, The thing I've always been troubled by that, it's not really visible from the road. Usually theaters are much more visible, especially nowadays. You see theaters like everything else being built off a highway that's visible from the
Right.
highway, so. And that's far from either of those.
Is that comedy club still open that took over the other?
No, that folded, that never really, to be honest, got off the ground. They actually never made 1 month's rent, the payment to the mall. They're leasing that building and it was never, you know. So they finally got evicted from it, but I know that they struggled. They weren't getting people in. So they did not have comedians. They.
Once in a while.
Not a good plan.
Mr. Supervisor.
Yes.
I think we do have 2 of our 3 speakers here. If you want to bring them up or.
Yeah, absolutely. Then come on up to the table here.
We're gonna find out in a minute.
Brian, is it?
It's okay.
It's live, be careful.
Would think it
Yes,
is.
I think
Hold
that
on,
there's
hold
a
on,
strip
hold on.
underneath the table.
It's right here. Yep. Follow the wires.
There's the strip under there in the middle there.
Hey, come up, sit right there.
Oh, yeah.
There you
Plugged in. Stuff situated.
Yeah, sorry.
Good. Well, as I said, we're gonna have a discussion up here, you know, just kind of an overview of the corridor, you know, we have our assessor Ted Drosky who will talk about, you know, some of the changes that will be coming that, you know, like some of the things we're just discussing in terms of the mall, and then we have commercial real estate folks here to give us the lay of the land and what they're seeing up there as far as the corridor as well. So why don't we start with Ted?
You know, Brian was talking about, or I guess you were Supervisor Fletcher, about the mall, so I just did a brief recap of what they bought and what they've sold and that sort of thing, so. thought I would Start with that.
Yes.
Very nice, thank you. Look at that.
Thank you.
You got one. Anyway, I mean, just real quick, so it's just, you know, they bought, well, the yellow blobs on there obviously represent what they purchased, so it's in multiple parcels. I think there's 7 or 8, so I just stepped through each one, you know, it was the Goodrich Theater that Supervisor Fletcher just mentioned, the Macy's building, the Regal, the inline stores at the mall, the Yonkers, Best Buy, and then iMart just to the west on Saginaw there a little bit. And since that time, so that's what they purchased for the about $8 million. And since that time, on the back, you'll see that they sold out the iMart parcel almost immediately. Then the Best Buy just not too long ago, and the Yonkers not too long ago. So if they're trying to get back their investment, they're getting close. Just a quick summary of what's going on with that. Other than that, you know, I don't know much with the mall itself. I saw the theater for sale last week or so, so I sent that to Manager Reed. Well, high dollar amount. I don't know what it's all about, you know, none of that. I haven't heard anything about Macy's in a long time. Inline stores get tenants here and there. Pennies is what it is. Years. But really, that's the mall, kind of what I know about that. The other thing I was going to step through, I hope I don't, talking about changes on the corridor. So what I did is I just went through in the last year or two and isolated properties that have sold. And I put them in my list here. And I was just going to run through them real quick so you have an idea of what's going on. And I'm not, I guess just so you know what's going on. There's several sales and they're kind of interesting and they're somewhat normal, but as an example, like Carrabba's, again, you don't know these things, but it was purchased by a San Francisco REIT. So REITs are real popular for purchasing strip malls, chain restaurants, like a Verizon store, because they're buying a long-term lease, right? They're buying paper. So they pay what we consider to be an inflated price, but to them, they get a great rate of return. They're almost certain they're gonna get a payment back. They think it's gonna appreciate in value, so they're very interested in buying a lot of these properties. And as I'll step through this, you'll see that they have purchased several of them in the last year and a half. But Carrabba's, as an example, was purchased by that San Francisco REIT for $1.4 million. Red Robin was purchased by Farmington Hills REIT for $1.6 million. The Lansing Mall that we just talked about, that's a change, obviously, in the last 2-3 years. Some are on the other one. The Applebee's just sold last month to a San Diego REIT for $1.7 million. Panera's was purchased last year by a California real estate investment trust, same thing. We're very comfortable buying these properties, buildings, so they have a solid tenant, good lease rates, and that sort of thing. So to me, it kind of shows that these folks feel it's somewhat stable, or they think these folks are going to be around renting these buildings for a long time, or they wouldn't.
Okay, what was Panera's? I'm sorry to interrupt you. What did Panera's sell it for?
I don't think they give it to me.
Okay.
If you find out, I'd be happy to.
I'm sure you will.
You know, it was interesting though, it was a tax appeal up to about a month ago. And that was our first question, you know, if we're gonna go further, you at least gotta give us what you paid for it. They never would, and then they dropped it, so. We're all happy.
Well,
Really?
All right.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
What's the number of years on these leases? When you say long-term, I mean.
Well, you know, I get
10 or
some of them, I don't get a lot of the leases because they don't share that with us. But like the Red Robin and Carrabba's, I believe they probably just hit their 20-year. They probably are just at the end of their first lease and now they're into their extensions is my assumption. So maybe they got a new 10-year or 2 5s or something like that. Whatever it was comfortable, made them comfortable enough to make the investment.
Yeah.
But I don't know exactly what the terms are.
I'm on the other end of one of these situations, just to answer your question. And in my case, I have 5 years left on a lease, and they wanted to renegotiate a new lease with me to try to lock it up longer term. So I am very curious too what the number is they look at for my own selfish reasons, but it is curious to watch how it inflates the price dramatically. To give you an idea, because I can use my own numbers because I don't mind. It's my business, right? So I have a 1 acre of land in Eastwood that in any normal scenario, an acre of land, you know, might be worth $250,000, $300,000. But because of my lease, it's 3.3 million.
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff that we see too. These are pretty normal, honestly. These prices aren't as crazy as what you're talking about. But sometimes, like the Verizon store on my list here, this is just a little Verizon store in front of Yonkers. And that one sold for, of course, so right here. Yeah, $2.5 million, and it's, you know, a 4,000 square foot store.
It's just all the cap rate on the lease, right?
Exactly, right on.
Yeah.
Right. So anyways, that's that one. As far as other sales, the Harbor Freight Store, the strip center with the Elrose Steel and Harbor and the restaurant was purchased by the Elrose Steel folks for $2 million. The Ryder Auto was a conversion of the Tuffy store. That was a $700,000 purchase. Couple small office buildings at 4517 West Saginaw sold for $460,000. The 4901 West Saginaw, which was the Look Insurance office building that many folks refer to it as, was purchased for a crack chicken restaurant for $400,000.
That answered my question. It looked like it was going to be a fast food with a drive-through, as I'm watching it kind of develop, right? Just the face of it.
Because I don't know for sure.
So originally, when they came to us, it was going to be strictly sit down and take out. But now they're considering reopening the drive-through. In order to do that, they need special. They have not made that application
yet. Lansing Town Center, so that's where the Ashley Home Center and ABC and Chuck E. Cheese and those folks are. That one sold 9 months ago for $8.75 million to the New Jersey REIT. Bank of America, banks are kind of common, not real common, but kind of get into this REIT thing as well. So that one sold for $1 million 9 months ago. The Burlington, all the third tenant that's in there. 3 tenants. Anyways, that's, but it's just
Big lot.
Big lot.
Big
big
lots.
lots, thank you. That one just sold for a non-disclosed amount. I haven't gotten that yet either. Huntington Branch Bank at 6101 South Saginaw, sold for 1.325 million to Waterford LLC. So again, that's just kind of a sampling. I wanted to give you a list of that. There is stuff going on. Things are
A
transferring.
lot of activity.
Selling for good amounts.
Isn't the building next to Verizon, didn't that sell too? The I place?
It does, it just isn't in the last
Oh.
year and a half.
No, gotcha,
Yeah,
that's true.
'cause it went from the mattress thing to the eye.
I care, yeah.
Yeah. Both of the top 15, if you will. And then Suzanne mentioned a little bit, you know, from an assessor standpoint, we're kind of after the fact sort of people. We're not the visionary types and planning types and all of that. So my job kind of is to just look at things after they sell, after they lease, but kind of not like a realtor or an investor type person, but more of a, okay, what does this mean to values overall? So that's kind of where my role really is.
And again, I didn't know anything about this a year ago, so maybe this will be helpful for other people, maybe not, but one of the situations, because I would like to buy the land and building under my property, and so I'm up against a REIT, and specifically some of the investors that I'm up against are 1031 transfer. So they're willing to overpay for these properties as well, because a 1031 basically says, and Martin, you can probably answer this better than I can, but basically if they sell another property, they have so long to take that capital value and reinvest it in another property. And if they do, they don't have to pay any taxes on it. So it's basically a way to shelter taxes so they can move from project to project. And so in the words of some of the people with the I group I was talking to, like, they don't care, right? They got the money. If they don't reinvest it, they're going to have to pay taxes on it. That's why they're willing to give it. And then the lease is favorable. So they look at their return on invested capital. That makes their investors happy. And so they're just moving money from one project to another, because eventually they would have to pay taxes if they stop doing that, right?
They will at some point.
Yeah, at some point, somebody's,
Deferred being the operative word there,
okay, thanks.
not free.
Right.
Some people
Fair.
call it tax free.
No, that's fair. Yep, and a good clarification.
Uncle Sam's always watching.
Yeah.
So Ted, one of the questions we heard and when we were creating the development plan and TIF plan for the Corridor Improvement Authority was concern about TJ Maxx or others going out to the interchange. Could you talk a little bit about those vacancies and if that has an effect on what we're looking at for the CIA?
Sure. You know, time will tell on a lot of it too. So, I mean, TJ Maxx is a perfect one. So that was backfilled with the daily deals or something like that. So I don't know what kind of quality tenants, you know, whatever. It's kind of different, but it was filled. Same with the Hobby Lobby that's moved now. Dick's Warehouse has opened there last week, I believe. So again, they're being picked up so far, which is great. It's just, you start to wonder about the quality of tenant. Will they be there for 20 years like the first tenant and that sort of thing? But sure, I imagine they'll have effect on all of this. Hopefully it's great. It's just too early to tell.
There's some other building going on that end of the corridor too, though. Are there things happening there? Or, I mean, right now I just see them basically demoing, but.
Yeah, I mean, that's the beauty store is one you're probably talking about. So we're all curious too, right?
Yeah.
We all want it done and developed, and unfortunately, it's been 3 years in the making probably to get 3/4 of the building torn down and nothing more. So I don't know unless Gary, if they talked to you recently.
Well, recently, because they were gonna demolish the entire site, and that was contrary to their approvals. They had some zoning board of appeals action that they had to comply with, so they had to reportion the structure. Non-compliance, I had to stop them on that. I'm not sure where they are today. That was as of last week. I mean, they're progressing very. I'm not sure, but the real.
I think it's my understanding they're also working with utilities. They need a new water service line board under Saginaw. So that's where they think that they do. So that's been another holdup.
You know, and a couple other things like, and they're smaller, but like Buffalo Wild Wings recently did a, $250,000 redo of their interior. Again, it's a large chain, so it's kind of different, but still, it's a good sign. The Brookside Plaza was looking kind of tough after Outback moved here. They backfilled that, which is great with the Ohana place. Farm Bureau was doing a $30 million redevelopment of their home office. Obviously, really good for us. The Meyer store did a convenience fueling station a year ago or so, and the other part of the store I think is on the horizon pretty soon. And then Menards is kind of doing a redevelopment of theirs, so again, some good signs if nothing else. Not a lot far east, I guess, other than the one that you had mentioned. Say from your business east,
Right.
Can't think of any other significant ones.
Yeah, me either. So. You may not know this, this may be unfair. I'm just curious. The Dick's Warehouse, is that literally a warehouse that they're using to store and distribute product, or is it?
It's retail.
It is retail. That's what I wondered.
It's just very warehouse. I mean, you go
Yeah,
in
I got
and
you.
it's not a Dick's like in the malls where you have it's racks with discounted goods that are left over. Like an outlet.
Yeah, okay, that's what I was wondering. So I'm glad it got filled though. I mean, I was very worried about
Yeah,
that.
that's what I
problem.
get.
Very, very generic looking inside.
But do we know, is the warehouse a temporary short-term thing, or is this like a long-term warehouse location?
They just showed up as far as I know. I didn't know anything about it, so. Gary, did you?
Yeah, I don't know what the length of lease is.
No, I didn't get a release either.
Brian, yeah, what you said.
Yeah, it looked like going further east, there were some dilapidated buildings that looked like they're being torn down or something going on. But now you're getting almost down to Waverly Road. But not sure what's going
It's
on
probably the
there.
Young's Beauty one that you're thinking of.
Maybe it was.
South side of the road, the
Yeah.
waterbed shop.
Yeah, they were tearing some stuff down. That was really junky looking.
Then the question still remains, what's going to ultimately happen with the Waverly Golf Course, and how does that impact the eastern, end of our township, on whether or not that will be a benefit or they'll have no impact whatsoever. I think part of it is obviously what ultimately comes in. I know they're talking about housing and stuff, but exactly how much and who's all going to be there and stuff, I think is still kind of unknown at this point. So that could certainly change things if you're bringing in a new influx of people who are living in close proximity. It could create some new demand for those locations for a variety of things. So we'll see if that has an impact.
What about O'Rafferty, the old O'Rafferty? Gary, what happened there? Did that just kind of fall apart?
So
Or?
that was the Morley company. They were getting the call center for
Yeah.
COVID, and then the COVID came, nixed those plans. We've had a couple of parties interested in redeveloping that site, but we had an issue with the Thomasville Parkway sanitary sewer lift station in terms of capacity during wet weather events. To add a lot of most of the proposal bid for mixed use developments, retail, residential, office. And problem with the lift station is that there's no more capacity. And we have to, every time we have a new development in the sewer system, we have to get it permitted through the Eagle, Michigan Department. All that, and we can't do that because there's no capacity. So that's any project dealing with redevelopment of that site is contingent on getting more capacity. Now, That's again, during weather events, there's a couple of drain projects that are coming in the future. That can help that a little bit. Those are, yeah, in the future. We don't know what the impact in terms of kind of relieving the pressure off.
Why don't we, at this point, while we bring into the conversation Van Martin, we now have Sean O'Brien up on our screen here. First of all, gentlemen, thank you. We appreciate you being here with us today. So I think we'll start with Van. Why don't you just kind of tell us, what are you seeing out there in terms of the corridor and what you think long-term? And then you've heard the discussion here, you know, there's obviously concerns and thoughts as, you know, one business moves farther down the corridor. What does that do to the property left behind? Is there a market for those types of properties? So just share with us what you're seeing out there.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of, the purpose of this is to take a look at the township, or just the corridor specifically.
Specifically the corridor, where the Corridor Improvement Authority is what this body is. So we're looking at coming up with a overall comprehensive plan to redevelop the corridor, or at least keep the corridor a strong, viable corridor. So we're having these preliminary conversations where we just kind of get the lay of the land on what's going on, what's out there, what's people seeing, what people, you know, thinking about, what do they see in terms of, you know, the future of the corridor, concerns that from their perspective they may see on the horizon, all things that we could take into consideration as we come up with an overall plan for the corridor.
Yeah. Well, I've seen a lot of change in my 40+ year career, and on the township, we've been involved in some of the developments. Typically, we're, you know, a service provider in terms of representing the either the developers or the occupiers. In many instances, the investors that I was talking about. Kind of a national phenomenon going on with the acquisition of triple net lease. It's been a very hot investment market across the board. A lot of this has been on food. Doesn't matter if it's REIT, family office, private equity, 1031 money that Scott was talking to. They've all been very active in acquiring these assets. And probably, you know, maybe slowed a tad bit with the rise in interest rates and what have you, but it'll remain very strong. They'll remain very strong demand going forward. So it's just a matter of where they trade and the pricing. So, you know, I see a lot of change in that corridor. I can remember back, I don't know, literally 45 years ago, when we had an office sitting over here on 16 acres on Delta Commerce Drive. And we ended up selling that and getting all that developed with McDonald's and the assisted living back in there, and Fairfield and Buffalo Wild Wings and everything that's in there now. Some of those are going to change hands over the period of years. But, you know, when you hit Waverly and you start heading west, I think there's been, you know, a nice uptick in terms of redevelopment and things that are going on in the market. So I think the real question is, what are the things that the township needs to be doing to continue that trend kind of going forward? And you're sitting in a pretty good shape. You got a good industrial base. You've had some housing ads going on, but I think a big part of what the township, you know, is looking for is getting that density and getting the housing in here to support, you know, a lot of these users and occupiers that are coming into the market, the businesses that need the, you know, the different types of housing to support it, whether it's the battery plant, whether it's Amazon or things of that nature. So you get some large parcels where you're going to have the opportunity to see some, I think, real good things out of, you know, on the housing side. And so I think that's a big, let's just say, support to, you know, the corridor and the activities that are going on, but, you know, really overall what's happening in the township. Sean, my buddy up here, Sean and I worked together for damn near 20 years, and a good friend, really is the retail guru, I think, in terms of what's happening. We worked on the Delta crossings, you know, my Lord, for, I don't know, how many years, Sean? 10, 15 years, and then kind of got across the finish line here in the last several years. And so I think there's more to that story as it plays out here. But I think there's been I think all these major retailers have looked to come west, you know, to say that the interior core retailers, I don't care if it's Kroger, I don't care if it's Meijer, I don't care if it's any of these big boxes, they're all looking at the trends and, you know, where they need to be. getting on the interchange, I think is a big plus for them, and a lot of them have looked at that. And, but, it's a matter of logistics and, where the housing stock is and, where they're drawing from. There probably will continue to be, a little bit of that yet. A lot of it is, probably been eaten up at this point in time. But I think, some of the, they churn and some relocate and the other ones get repurposed, whether you get a Dick's warehouse or you get these other types of occupiers that are going to come in. If you've got the community and you've got, economically, if you're in the position where you are with, the township, you're going to continue to attract, these types of people with the right demographics. And, that's really long-term probably, what you're striving for all of these, especially all these sectors that are going to come out here, whether it's bank, whether it's, food, whether it's, any type of retail users, whether it's the box, whether it's the mid-size, the mom and pop, the franchisees, that are coming, as long as you're driving and creating that environment for them, and, allow them reasonably to get through the process and, have success so that they can get the projects up and down in a reasonable period of time. Some of these things you talked about have been, hanging out there for 2 or 3 years, perhaps COVID affected it, perhaps they're not just the right developers, or they've had other impediments or hurdles that they needed to get over. There's so many factors that go into all of these things to look at it. And, we sit here and we all speculate a little bit because none of us know it all. And, what the factors are that affect these projects. So, I think townships and got a lot of real positive things going on. And I drive down here and I'm I like, what I'm seeing in terms of some of the redevelopment and activities that are occurring there. So that's just kind of a general overview. But.
Okay, well, we appreciate that, man. Sean, would you like to add anything to this discussion there?
Well, sure. I think Van covered a lot of territory there. What I would reiterate a little is years, probably 5-6 years ago, maybe it's longer than that now, when the first corridor study was done, when discussion of Delta crossings came up on the rezoning. Part of it was rezoning and I guess the mixed use elements that were brought in. And I think there was a lot of concern about what would happen to the east end of West Saginaw Highway if everything was starting and new development was going to be enshrined on the west side of the highway. And I think there was a lot of concern initially. And I think, that centered a lot around the mall. And I think it doesn't matter where you're located in a tertiary market, malls are having a hard time. They're not going to be, there's probably going to be 1/10 of the malls that there once were, and they're going to be in a different element, and they're going to typically be in very large metropolitan areas. For example, Detroit might end up with, the Southeast Michigan area might end up with legitimately four regional or really super regional malls, and the tenants are going to be spread out with super high luxury and specialty retail that is going to draw from a large base. And I think the key that Saginaw or the Delta Township has is the traffic patterns that are generated by the 69, I-86 and the West Saginaw intersection, that corridor. There's over 100,000 cars a day. And that's unique in Lansing, and it makes it a destination for retail. And it's also a huge draw for, number one, the job space that are being created in Delta Township with all the new announcements. That's going to drive developers to want to develop housing, and retail is going to follow the housing. And the housing is going to be pushed to the west because there's available land. The demand will be there, and the rest of the corridor is going to benefit because it's going to be seen as a super regional destination. And I think that there's no doubt that if you look at even on the eastern end of East Saginaw with the Waverly Golf Course site being redeveloped, there's going to be a lot of rooftops developed into that, whether it's 400 to 500 rooftops. Those will be families, those will be consumers, and it's going to really create, I think, a rebirth of some of the older retail down on that section. And, you know, there are going to be additional needs for more grocery, more big box type stores, because all of a sudden this, you know, this corridor is seen as probably the primary retail corridor in the mid-Michigan region. And, you know, obviously smart growth is trying to incorporate as many different in being inclusive as far as the types of businesses that you want to attract. And you also want to make sure that the businesses that are in the developments are cohesive in the way, in the ability to include, you know, multiple types, because retailers need office workers nearby to feed the restaurants and feed the after hours shopping and so forth that occurs. So, I mean, it has to be a planned environment to allow different types of uses. You've got your industrial, obviously West Saginaw shouldn't be an industrial corridor, but there is an opportunity with the reuse of some of these older buildings to create more diversity in what buildings are being offered, because as everybody knows, the cost of construction is very high, and it allows reuse of existing bricks and mortar to be a paramount for occupiers that are looking for reasonable cost of construction. So I think in overall, it's very forward of the Delta Township to consider this and consider some things that can promote redevelopment of existing infrastructure along the corridor. And I think, you know, the market speaks for itself. All developers look at the demographics and look at what's going on, and there's it's very attractive.
Sean and Dan, you both mentioned demographics. Could you define what the demographics are that make it attractive or would make it more attractive for retailers and developers to come into the market?
Well, we probably say about the same thing, but you know, you got the density in the number of housing units in the blocks, and then you know, they're looking at the demographics in the 1 3 5 mile radius, typically in terms of average, you know, household income, you know, and depending upon the retailer, and you know, they're fitting their model into certain areas of these demographics, and that's what appeals to them. So, you know, disposable income, you know, how much, you know, these families have to spend on dining or other retail purchases they're going to make. You know, and it's different whether you get automobiles, whether you get the house, you know, the restaurants that are going on, whether you got the retail, the type of retail, the level of retail. I mean, you're gonna get a certain type, as opposed to going into some other areas where they're gonna have a whole different flavor of retailers, and you know, the level that, you know, they're, you know, it's gonna be different. Just start on Delta, you know, West Saginaw, Delta Township, than it is, say, Naples, Florida, or, you know, Palm Beach or something of that nature. You have different flavor types of retailers. But then you still got the ones everybody wants to go to tropical smoothie and get something to you know, drink or what have you. So Sean,
Here, Van, I'll save you a little there. No, actually, what retailers are really looking for is they're looking for growth. You know, when we look at Lansing region, we might have 1% growth on an annual basis on average. And that doesn't get retailers very excited. So when they start looking at the combination of if Delta Township is growing at a faster pace than the rest of, certain Michigan markets, they're going to rank areas that they want to expand by what's happening from a growth standpoint. And yes, to an extent, income growth. And, when you have large employers in an area, that tends to increase the income growth over, less stable markets. And so the combination of, what does the region have to offer to attract rooftops, new families into the area? It's school, it's accessibility, and it's jobs. Those are things that attract families. Retailers look for growth and they look for traffic counts, and the combination of, okay, does this region attract people from outside of Delta Township? And absolutely yes. And the more it attracts people because of, the proximity to other businesses, corporate headquarters, and, the growth that we expect from the GM announcements for the EV systems. Those kinds of things are all help a retailer consider Delta Township versus another market. Retailers come in and they say, we're going to look at 12 markets. We can do 12 locations in the market, or 12 new markets this year. And how does Delta stack up? That's what it comes down to, selling our market versus another market, because they can't do every market all at once. And that's kind of how we have to position our market. And when you're positioning properties for sale or for development in this market, that's kind of what you're up against.
Do you see any challenges, going kind of the question list, that challenges or barriers then to redevelop those properties, or to get that attractive development to come in?
You want to go first or second, John?
Rock, paper, scissors.
Well, I think I'll take a stab at it, but I'm not going to hit them all. That's for sure. The challenges are, I guess this Delta Township is seen as a developer-friendly community, and because they have, you have professional staff, you have people that care in the government area, both from the local government and the fact that the community is seen as a desirable community. So you have demand, and you have, you got a limited supply of resources in both in the available land that's zoned, and then obviously utilities and so forth, where I know you get further west on Saginaw Highway, and there's, to the edge of the township, there isn't utilities yet. And I think there's a demand out there for additional growth and development. And so that's a challenge I see currently. I do believe that there are challenging properties along the Saginaw corridor. And some of those are, just because they're privately owned, and the developers or the owners of the property may not be willing to commit the risk and resource to redevelopment. So I think you have a little of that. And I think maybe let's say Lansing Mall has that issue right now. Clearly that 500 or 600,000 square feet of bricks and mortar needs to be redeveloped. And whether that current developer or current owner is willing to do that, I mean, it takes significant risk and analysis and capital to get that done. So creating an environment that brings other attractive developers into that market, into that opportunity, would be ideal. It's a challenge.
So I piggyback a little bit. Yeah, the Lansing Mall will be interesting. You may be saying the same thing, John, that maybe that particular owner, developer of that, of the mall, I don't know if he's going to create redevelopment that perhaps we would all like to see in certain types of market. He may be more interested in doing exactly what he's doing with this, just kind of piecemealing it off and getting this investment back and, getting something out of it. But that's probably an offline discussion. I think part of it, in today's environment right now is, everybody's hit on it, including Sean, is, cost. And so you've got the cost, clearly as a hurdle, interest rates go up, adds to it, all the supply chain issues adding to the, the increased cost. It doesn't matter if you put the roof on or paving asphalt or any particular piece of product that's got to go into every single building that's going on. So, it's really, part of it gets into the economics of doing new developments and what can, Delta Township, support. What are the retailers willing to pay based upon, what's here, the demographics and so forth that are here also. So it's like a puzzle, you get all these pieces that kind of go into it. Cost, you get the economics. Are we going to have the real rent growth, to be able to support, new and, certain types of development that maybe you'd like to see? Or, is it going to remain relatively, flat? But I think some of it lends it to perhaps an increase, focus along the lines of, redevelopment of, a lot of these existing, centers and commercial buildings that are a little bit old and tired or what have you. Some of them will get ripped down and, some people come in that aren't as cost sensitive. There are some of those, but I think you might see an increased activity in some of the redevelopment of existing facilities that kind of lends itself to this, where we are at this point in time in the economic cycle. But I think cost, the economics, rent growth, what we can see in the particular market. It's a big equation, like I said, there's a lot of pieces of the puzzle that kind of go together. But as a township, if you, with what you're doing and what your focus is, you continue the momentum of what's going on, and you are in a, this regional mecca in terms of drawing consumers and so forth in here, and you do it right, then I think the probability goes up that you're going to be able to achieve perhaps some of those things and see other types of development.
Are there certain things we shouldn't do? Any don'ts that would cool things and make it less attractive for them to come in?
Well.
Don't make it more difficult to go through your approval processes.
That's you, Jerry.
Yeah.
Just push the broom.
Every municipality has this reputation on, they're friendly, and I think Sean alluded to this earlier. And some municipalities just aren't as friendly for people coming in and make it hard to get done, and then the process to get through to get your approvals. And a lot of times when a developer's got a project out there and they're getting, they got something that they're going to do, time is important. They have to be able to deliver, and they've got their back to the wall, and many times they're at risk for delivery, and so time frames are important. So on a broader scale, with what's going on in the market, coming out of what we have, and I think everybody was surprised what happened during COVID. After the first 90 days of COVID, everybody's sitting here and saying, "What's this world going to be like?" Well, I know it was like when I got in the car to drive south. There wasn't anybody on the road. I didn't have to worry about hitting somebody on the side or swerving or drinking your coffee, whatever you're doing. There was nobody there. It was the twilight zone. And it's amazing how some of these sectors have, how they have adapted and survived. And, kind of a testimony to, the people and that are in businesses and their entrepreneurialism and, adaptability to change how they do business so that they can, still, transact and, get the product out the door and so forth. But surprisingly, everybody thought retail would fall off the ledge. And, it took a big hit, there's no question. But retail has surprisingly done quite well. And, really, obviously the housing markets, the multifamily did exceedingly well. Industrial, the logistics did exceedingly well. It's, at this point, the jury's out, everybody asks, what's happening with office? What's everybody's workplace strategy? When is everybody gonna be back in the office? And, there's a lot of theories on it, and there's a lot of information flow on it, and we're inundated with it. And, the pendulum swings a little bit here and it swings back a little bit there. Some of it depends upon the type of business that you have, and certain people being able to work from home, more efficiently, get it done. But I think office is the outlier there. And it's different in a market like this, a tertiary smaller market, than it is, perhaps in an urban market. And
Van, if I can interrupt a second, I think.
No, you can't.
One thing that Van started to hit on, and I think this is important because a lot of the, there's one of the most difficult things for employers right now is attracting and retaining talent and young talent. And, I've had 3 daughters grow up in the Lansing area, and I think 3 for 3 will be moving out of this area only because they look for excitement of what a bigger market offers. They go off to Chicago, or they go off to Royal Oak or wherever else and hang out, and they like that, and then maybe come back to raise a family if we're lucky. But I think, and we're hiring people, as Van is too, hiring young people and keeping them in town. They want to be at a location, in an office, and an environment that is exciting and got a lot to do. And I know that a community, it's hard for a community to create all that, but really it's one of the difficult things is retaining young talent. And I think we have to look beyond traditional office parks. If we look at our office parks, there's nothing exciting about them. For the most part, they're not high-rise buildings. There's not interspersed retail, walkable restaurants within these office buildings. And I think that you have to create, and when we're dealing with some new clients that want to relocate within the Lansing market, they want a place where they can get out of their car or, park and get there, but they have places they can walk to, a coffee shop to have meetings, or restaurants. So I really think that the office parks of the future need to be mixed use. They need to have an element that is going to attract, it's going to attract young people. It's going to be more active. And I think that we need to look at mixing our uses more so than ever before, so that we create a healthy mixture of, office, retail, maybe not so much industrial there, but live, work, and play nearby, and eat and dine and whatever.
Yeah, and on the backside of that, there's probably not going to be a lot of new office parks, quite frankly, in Lansing. We just, in terms of the growth and so forth. So it's going to be a sector that's, it's kind of a wait and see how this thing, how it's going to evolve. There will be certain buildings that come online. They will probably come online in some of the departments Sean referenced. I agree with that. But back to the point that I was, talking about is that you have to look at Lansing in the small tertiary market that we are. And it's a lot different than being in the major urban areas. So the office dynamics there are different than they are here. So because the suburban markets have been stronger than the urban markets as we've kind of evolved out of the COVID here. And the one constant that you hear with office is flight to quality. And that is, the office that has, say, 30,000 square feet, they don't need it anymore. And so when their leases, are rolling over, and that's just what we're dealing now as we're coming over to COVID. You take all these leases that were signed, prior to the COVID, and it's different in major urban markets than sometimes it is in a market like this. But as those leases expire, they're all reconsidering what their workplace environment, how much space they need, where they want to be, what are the amenities that they need, either in their building or the walkability that again Sean referenced. And those are drivers. So the best buildings are going to be the ones that are occupied, okay? And they're going to be able to keep their rents up. But those dynamics of how those leases are getting negotiated and structured are different than they, today than they were, pre-COVID. The cost of TI, tenant improvement, that goes into a tenant office today has risen dramatically. And, and so, the tenants have their concept of, okay, I'm paying $20 for rent, or I'm paying, whatever, just pick a number. And they want to pay the same thing. They don't want that cost to go up. But then when their lease rolls over and they want improvements, the landlord's got to put them in, they're way more, when we negotiate leases over the years, you might provide, say you provide a $30 TI allowance and so forth, and do the same thing today, it takes $50. So how do they compensate for that? Well, the landlords say, well, I'll do it for you, but instead of this 5-year lease, I want a 7 or 8 year lease. And so the dynamics of these office leases and how they're being negotiated, is changing as a result of the environment. Also,
What do you guys see? We along the corridor, the other big piece of open land is the former Mike Ide property. What do you guys see? What do you envision would be a good fit to go in there? What do you think will happen with that property?
depends on the developer. A lot of it depends on who they sell to. And, the owner is they're gonna make that choice. And then, what the developer's, vision is in terms of they come in, but, it's a great piece of dirt, well located. I think just a lot of opportunity, on that particular, parcel that's in there. I think some of it is still regulated. Is it not?
Well, the entire
Units
acreage is regulated by consent judgment. So in a way, it presents an opportunity for the board to do almost anything, because it is a consent judgment. All the typical rules are out the window. You just have to amend a consent judgment to.
Well, I think it's a great, it's a great piece of property. Sean and I would agree on it. I think there's a lot of opportunity for it there. You just hope you're gonna get the right developer. He's got a great vision that you can execute.
Yeah, and the other thing, I know that there's some, I had some developers looking at it, and there's some rolling sections of it that are more challenging to develop, and I think there may be some wetland areas and so forth there that that are on the north, or excuse me, the south end of it. I would say the township should be very flexible on how that's zoned, because I believe that that some of it is pegged for office and some of it's planned for commercial. I think maybe 40 or so acres of it commercial, maybe, and 50 or so office. I would, and some multifamily in there, I'm sure. I would like to see a developer come in and really mix it up and create a destination type of neighborhood there that could really integrate all of those pieces. And I think that's possible. And I think
almost its own village, eh?
What's that?
Almost its own village.
Well, I think that's what, what's gonna, I believe that we need to be very creative in some of the neighborhoods we build for unique environments, the park-like settings. People want to, necessarily, they don't want the big footprint to mow a acre and a half yard, or 1 acre parcel like you have some big ones in Delta Township. I think there's if we want to create a unique environment where you're going to have well located, because you can get to 496 or 96 in a mile and a half either direction. That's an interesting opportunity, and I think it should be it's a real opportunity to create something different that Lansing doesn't have and Delta doesn't have.
Yeah, but part of it is, again, it's who shows up and makes it by, and then what they're going to do and how you're going to work with them there.
Has there been any movement on that? Has there been any conversations with that owner?
Nobody's come.
Nobody's come out any bill. Okay.
I talked with,
Clearly, the owner of the property, we have made it, or the attorney representing the estate,
Yeah.
we've made it clear to them that the township is certainly open and, to consider and look at changes. And we realize that the original consent agreement there isn't necessarily what's in the best interest of that property, but you got to have a proposal. We're not going to start changing things without a real proposal in front of us.
Okay.
Well, part of it also is pricing, that they have pretty high expectation of pricing. I mean, $400,000 an acre doesn't work here in Lansing. I mean, I suppose for a single acre use, that's fine, but when somebody's looking at a large, for example, West Saginaw retail, I mean, the 200 acres, the average price was, I think, is around $87,000. Okay. Well, and so I tell them, we're going to spend 16 or $20 million on infrastructure. You're going to spend the same amount on the other site. And you have to have the land price work, because the cost of development, as Van says, is continuing to go up, the infrastructure costs, and, the tenants aren't going to pay any more rent. So the numbers don't work, and that's what's holding that back right now. I think there's probably developers who would take a run at it, but, the cost per acre on an overall specter size parcel like that, you have to deal with, it has to be realistic. I mean,
I obviously, I've worked with Sean, just for the record, and have projects that I'm working with Sean on, but I mentioned to Brian earlier that I think I think it's more likely than not, you're gonna see some movement in the eyed properties. There's some changes afoot. A new trustee is officially in transition right now, taking that over. I'm meeting with them tomorrow at 2:00 for different reasons. But I think it's safe to say, this is not factual, but this is my strong opinion. I'll know more tomorrow. I think their mission is they're charged with turning that, the Mike Guide assets to liquidate them. Obviously, they want to liquidate them for as much money as they can, whether it's going to come off of the numbers that have happened in the past or not, that I have no idea. But I know that the reason it's, shuffling is they want more progress more quickly on turning this estate into cash.
Yeah, clearly, Mike did what he wanted to do when he was alive. And sometimes that's exactly what you got, a piece of vacant land.
Right. And Mike would.
But the movement now, there's no question that that's going forward. I mean, they're moving assets, they're going to continue to move them, and I agree with you, they will, it'll continue to accelerate. You'll see these things get moved.
Yeah, well, the other thing too that complicates the situation is, they got an appraisal on all of the 90 or so assets that they had, and some of those appraisals I would kind of second guess. But bottom line is
we don't second guess appraisals, do we?
Well, they were made as instructed. Okay, put it that way. MAI.
Sean, I did my own third-party assessment and used their bank to do it for the property that I have an offer in on Jackson. And to your point, it's $650,000 difference.
Yeah.
And so I think that, well, there's going to be new people to talk to who are
right. No,
I
I
think
know.
going to have to be willing to take some more third-party local assessments to get redone, whether that's by prospective buyers or them doing it themselves. Because what's driven it up till now might be something else, not the least of which is book value.
Yeah.
So.
Right.
Sean, what's going on with, we're talking about the Mike IPs and crates there. What's going on with Delta crossings? Is that, we know?
I was gonna ask about that later.
Is it okay if we ask that question?
Well, it's in court right now. There's supposed to be a phase that is supposed to close by this month. We'll see if it happens. But it's, I don't know how it's going to work out. Essentially there was, from what I understand, a forced auction between the partners. So something is going to shake out pretty quickly.
See, Chris is not here. Is that the purpose?
Hasn't been here.
Yeah, I know, it hasn't been here, but,
Been invited to be here.
yeah, but he hasn't responded, he hasn't, okay. Just
Yeah,
curious.
so there's, they got the site plan approved for the multifamily, and the group that wants to get that moving is ready to start. They've got their financing, but we'll see if they can, pull that off. There's another phase of the commercial 20 acres that is slated to hopefully close this month. We'll see. But they're, then they have to clear up the mechanics liens and so forth that are on some of the properties to get the at-home back under construction. And, I am not kept up. They're trying to get
There's a lot of legal issues on it.
a lot of legal issues. They're trying to move it out of Oakland County into Eaton County. We'll see if that happens.
A lot of legal issues.
Sure.
As Paul Harvey says, the rest of the story.
It's after 5, so I want to recognize everybody's time and everything. Do folks have any final questions here for any of our panelists? Okay.
Suzanne, was that everything we had that we talked about previously? Characteristically along the corridor, is there any, do we have enough there?
One question that we've asked past panelists is kind of what's the ideal state? I mean, if you had,
There you go.
if looking for the vision for 20 years out, is there thinking about writing a scope or doing a plan and thinking about what should be included in that plan? Are there some things when you think about the corridor that should happen that, your vision is like, this would really make a difference on changing and improving the corridor that you could think of?
Wow. I mean, there's a lot of great corridors out there in, parts of the country, if that's kind of what you're asking.
Could you give some examples?
Yeah, well, I go down to Naples, Florida, and I drive down, Tamiami Trail on 41 down through there, and you just see what it looks like, and it's beautiful, and but different market, different demographics, all again. But there's so many. John probably have better examples. He's the retail guy.
Well, it's hard to, you visualize what West Saginaw is going to be like in, the next few years. It's, I think it's continuing to put investment into the community as a great place to live, and, the schools. And I think that the infrastructure's pretty well developed. I think that, you've obviously got a significant amount of vacant land on the west side of the township there that could fall into, that's going to be, residential and commercial both, and it's still a lot of industrial that's undeveloped. So I think if you focus on the positives that Delta has, you'll find that, you're going to attract, a lot of growth over the next 10 to 15 years that could, just by being ready, having capacity and having willing staff, and, you treat the developers correctly, or not correctly, but you treat them by, taking care of their business concerns and getting them through the planning process, which you typically do very well and efficiently. I just think that it's hard to envision moving a lot of people compare Lansing area to Columbus or something. I mean, there's not much Delta Township's going to be able to do to create a huge, increase in regional development. But I think by keeping it keeping attention to, you know, the residential and the schools community, that you're gonna continue to attract quality development for housing. And with that, you know, and the jobs that are being created now, and being able to be developer friendly for businesses like auto owners and GM and others, those are the things that are going to keep them here and attract new.
Yeah, you gotta keep your standards up too, so. All the stuff's gotta be good.
Right, well, that's why we're all here today, to, you know, to have a committee that's in place to do what we need to do to make sure that we keep the corridor a good, strong place to do business, and then hopefully that corridor and what we do there can help spur, you know, keep the rest of the township good. So we appreciate all of you guys today for being here to be part of this discussion. It's been very helpful, very beneficial to hear your thoughts on what you're seeing out there, and we definitely have some work to do as we move forward, and then keep moving forward to the point of putting together our overall master plan for it. Peggy, did I see your hand going up, or you're getting ready to ask a question? Okay. Well, with that, if folks don't have any other questions or anything, then we'll stand adjourned. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.